My lecture tonight is called Dialogue in Architecture, and it is really based upon that exhibition outside called Dialogue in Details. And it was commissioned by Venice Biennale 2012 by David Chipperfield, who's a British architect, a friend, and it's titled Common Ground. In architecture, there are many common grounds, but I took this theme of common ground as history. What type of history we have in common with the previous generation or the generation previous to us? What is a legacy? How do we transmit as architects? And also common ground of details. I picked details because that's a common ground of collaborative practice of architecture. We cannot do all the work alone. We need clients, we need site, we need Michael Walker, we need structural engineers, we need landscape architects. It's a teamwork where details, where all the elements of materiality, ideas, tectonic construction all merge like an essence. And from architectural point of view, for architects, if you're really architects, we really look at details. You can discover many different elements of this amazing collaboration, and you can actually discover complexity of a discipline of architecture. So that was the idea. And I took 5 American masters with whom I had relationship, no personal relationship. I wish, because they're all very handsome guys. Lloyd Wright, Mies van der Rohe, Marcel Breuer, Paul Rudolph, and Philip Johnson. And then I have made built buildings next to, or in addition to, reference to. So these are the masters that I admired with. And also there are texts throughout in which I had texts of academics, 3 academics, Anthony Vidler, Dietrich Mertens, John Haydock, the American academics who influenced me. There are quotes of them throughout. So in Venice, Jeff Kipnis, who teaches at Ohio State, said, Toshiko, your exhibit about you and 5 big guys. And I'm like, no. The idea is, yes, these are 5 big guys, but they are very important 5 big guys. And then idea is to promote their legacy and how do I work through. Like, responsibility for architects is always for the future generation. And what's amazing about this exhibition outside for me is that Cynthia was able to squeeze. It was huge hall I had in Venice, in Central Pavilion, and able to squeeze it, but in a way perhaps more intimate and more comprehensive than the way I had in Venice. And this was the way you walk through. I was somewhere between bookshop and Norman Foster. But everybody had to walk through, so it was very popular. But at the same time, it was like I made these details at half size as totems, so they become more of an animistic figure, so that one has more of a visceral experience of what it looks like, as well as some architects can study some small points of it. So that's actually what it looked like. In Venice, it was quite vast. But I quite like the way you have organized it in this gallery because of intimacy. And knowing how much work it is for you to open this center, I'm just such a about this particular endeavor. But to start this entire dialogue series, I will do dialogue with architects, dialogue with artists, ecology, and then I will talk about the last project, is what I had mentioned about African project, which actually is a result of what I learned from this particular region, especially ecology, climate, community, and everything else. One of our earliest projects is in New Canaan, Connecticut. In fact, this is actually where about 100 modern houses still exist. There are pockets of community, like Sarasota, there's New Canaan, some in Cape Cod, and then Los Angeles area. There's a pockets of modernist legacy that exists, and they were all experiments, as you all know. And this was John Black Lee, who built a house for himself, and my client bought it, and she wanted to renovate it. This was what you call modernist, how do I say, big wreck. The roof, as rain was coming in, it looks really nice. And as you can see, the modernist houses, architects or her own house, is since architects live in there, if roof collapses, it doesn't matter. I'm the only one who gets wet. So in a way, it was experimental, but also it was done in a Jeep. And this house was clad with ping-pong tables, the exterior. So structure was damaged. And the idea was I have replaced all the structure. This was like architectural dentistry. I had to go in there, support it, cut through it, and exchange every wood member with a steel. And this steel is a very delicate steel, but if you know the structure, steel can span more, so that if you replace wood with steel, you end up with much more thinner steel because the base is the same as a wood. So, and also increase the height 1 foot a little bit, very subtle dental surgery, which I made so that it doesn't lose the spirit of ethos of this building. That's actually a very important point that I'm very careful. This is one of a few what I call reconstruction of actual building I have done of original architect. In this case, the guy was alive, John Blackley, and he's still alive, and he liked what I did, thankfully. And he actually thought that, and I was able to have a real conversation with him as to how I'm approaching, how I'm updating with the materials, new code, having it resistant to wind. So all of that going to this building. And since then, I think this client has had more additions, very simple. And then Betsy Coins. The circumstances in which I had this encounter with Betsy, I believe, was that I was a board member of Van Allen Institute. So I totally sympathize with all your board members of how to run Architectural Center. And I was helping to organize Paul Rudolph exhibition. And this was probably the last one he has done. And it's about his furniture and his Southeast Asia tall buildings. Paul Rudolph was alive then, and he told me, and I was working with exhibition designers, curators, but he was told, as a board member, I approached him, how would you like us to arrange framing and everything? He says, no, you don't have to worry about it. I know how to frame my drawings. I will deliver it. I said, okay. So he arrives. A huge roll of plastic, and I said, what is that, Paul? And he says, that's my drawings. I framed it. There's no wood frame. He just unrolled it. It looked like a huge shower curtain with his drawings sandwiched between. I said, what did you do? He said, I just went to my local meat packing company, have my drawings vacuum packed. So how do I hang this? You just said it, hang it like a shower curtain. So this was the exhibition that I think Betsy and Ed had seen or heard about, and we were talking about it, and she said, oh, you know Paul's work. We have a Paul Rudolph house. Would you like to do addition or guest house? And of course I jumped on it because he is one of the architects I admire the most, and such an amazing opportunity. So this is how start of my adventure with Sarasota School of Architecture is with Paul Rudolph shower curtain. So this is the original Cohen House, and it's one of the very unique aspects of it. It's wood. It has a slightly more Japanese ideas behind it, but also has Sarasota School, which is overhang and clear story, large open spaces, and amazing symbiosis with nature. And this particular Sarasota School of Architecture, for me, we call it, also Michael Sorkin terms it as tropical modernism. And then also Chris Domin and Joe King, from here, Joe King is still around. Chris Domin moved on to Arizona. They continue to do scholarly work of Sarasota School of Architecture. They call it regional modernism. in which they have adopted what you call the modernism of European origin to this particular climate. So this is very, very unique because even in New England, we don't see such radical modification. And there's a lot of sensitivity to climate and site ecology, ventilation, and how to take care of wind and heavy rain and sun. That's being concerned, which you don't see a lot of places, except there's one in Tel Aviv, the Bauhaus. I think there's another one which really dealt with its particular climate. So it's very important what you have in this particular legacy. And I looked at it, and this is very beautiful. And I think challenge for architects to build next to or in addition to these masters is how do you compete. So the idea is you can't compete. But you don't give up, but you want to create a dialogue. And you feel like in your dreams, since this, I think Paul was alive, I never had a conversation. I think Betsy had a conversation, right? And I think you have to tell us in the tour tomorrow what that was like. But he didn't live to see the results. And first project I did was the guest house for the Cohens. And their children are getting older. They need another space. But also their main house is 1 bedroom. It's something like to get from your bedroom to kitchen, you have to walk like 100 feet, something extreme like that. And then subsequently, I have done a guest house because the kids were there, but their family was growing. They took over, so Ed and Betsy were getting kicked out, and they said, I need a house for ourselves. So in a way, I have gone through that. That's the property from air that it looks like. And that's the original house. And that's what I've done. And as you know, because of flood, wave crest height, we had to raise the habitable space 17 feet above, higher than, because we really want to make sure that you can have a see-through to both sides of a bay and a gulf. And you can actually see through from 2 parts of a T-shaped intersection where there's a stair is. You can peek through and always orient oneself to the original house. So if they were there, they can always reference themselves to the original house. And it's a steel, like in John Blackley house, to withstand the new code. But I took the same bay and module as the original house. So in a sense, that's actually one of the things I always try to do is somehow to keep the scale of the original, but alter the material and proportion and material use to update it for the contemporary code need and then material life. And also still this, it also made sure that I want a house which is low maintenance. The wood can be very difficult. But eventually what happened is there's a stainless stair over there, but stainless is not stain free. It had surface rust. So for the next one, guest house, I think you'll see tomorrow, I end up building a fiberglass stair, which should be completely maintenance free. So it has an evolving learning process for me. And it's all built on sand piers. And Rudolph used Ocala block, concrete block, harvested from nearby quarry, Ocala, which is all, you can't get that anymore. So, but I used concrete block from this particular region to emulate the similar, like a Flemish one. So there's this always reference back and forth and imagining how would he have had approached it if he had to do this house. So there's that kind of resemblance and recall and respect to what he has done. So it's raised, but you also see through at the bottom, like you see through in their house, which is on the ground. And you have this sense that when you're on the ground, you really don't feel like there's a house. You still see the landscape through. Cornell Rothschild had this wonderful landscape for all the properties for this project. So this was addition, which is more of a challenge because it's going to be right next to the Rudolph house. In a similar strategy like this, but I had used the background is Rudolph house, the front, more of a glass to increase transparency. And then also, in a way, it's the Bayside, so I was allowed to build on grade instead of stilts. So there's a continuity, and you will see on site tomorrow, there's a pergola that tenuously but decisively connects those two buildings together, which allowed authorities to make it into what you call addition house, like that. This was a key element to get approval. And this is the exterior element, but again, it makes a connection, very subtle way of making connection to that. I hope you can all come and we can talk more in detail, because I like today to talk about a little more other details. Marcel Breuer, this is again his own house. And he even had his family, even his mother was living there. And this was going to be demolished. This is New Canaan, Connecticut. He lived between 1951 and 1975. He had his own office there. And this has gone through many change of hands. And by the time we were looking at it was going to be demolished to be replaced with a huge McMansion. And one of the interesting things about those 1950s, early 60s buildings by architects is architects always have good eyes and they find beautiful sites. So this particular project site became more valuable than the house itself. And as you saw, house is tiny. And my clients, bishops, said, we have to save the house. And they lived in a fairly traditional house and said, what are you going to do? I'm going to sell the house. We're going to buy this house. We're going to put stop demolition order to town of New Canaan. And then you're going to design us a house with addition. But we have 3 kids and they're all very tall. So I think, how do you fit into all this? I mean, it's like Breuer's mother was old and small. She didn't move around, but they really had big athletes, kids. So this was the original. So the challenge is, and also it's been altered with many times. And for me, it's what is the distinctive characteristics of Marcel Breuer? And what is clear is how he used stone. His stone walls are unique. The way he puts stones together, he doesn't do it and it's a signature piece. And we restored it completely. And that was what we're going to make a base of this addition. So this was the original house. Addition was made, but this was all crumbling, so we had to take down. And there's pool house, which we also renovated as well. And what I did is that to make the original house more of a public space, like a living room, kitchen, family area, and then a living room so that all big kids can have big bedrooms. And then renovated pool house. And what I inserted it, there's an existing opening to Breuer, and in a sense similar to the Breuer strategy in which I had made an access from a new guest house to visible to Rudolph House. What I did is that every time you come through the garage and going upstairs, one experienced the old, original building and the new in the passage of a day of a family life. And it's raised just above the level of side wall. And then we have introduced skylights to give more lights and also height, because ceiling was like 7 feet high. So it's for tall kids, they didn't fit. So the idea also is to a material use in which I have introduced glass of different translucency and transparencies so that it has, oops, what happened? Well, and that's a massing. And this massing is Breuer, whenever he did his multi-building, he always aligned his buildings right angles to each other. But this diagonal stair noted that somebody else did that. It's not Breuer addition at all. So that's the result of it, that the glass building is larger, But idea is that because of reflectivity, translucency, mutability of surface, it becomes more recessive than a stone. And you can see the stone was in fact small, but my strategy as an architect is to do a big building, but make smaller building appear more monumental. So it become a monument. So this is not an easy one, but I thought about a lot how to do it, to give it. So what I do is always a bridesmaid. So what I have to do is how to make the bride look good in all the circumstances. So this is a passage between, it is a passage at night, and where it faces the driveway is translucent, and where it faces the garden is transparent. That's how that looks like, and it's a view to a pool house. And we used the steel again in this case, and Breuer had attempted cantilevers many times, but he attempted in wood, and a lot of times it just didn't stay up. So this time the cantilever that stays up. That's the night view of a compound. More challenging project is the Dobby Martine House, which Lloyd Wright built in 1906. And this is Buffalo, New York. And it's in his mind, Lloyd Wright always had the drawing of this house next to his desk. Thinks it's a masterpiece on his own. I mean, he had a lot of egos, but he himself really thought this was the greatest one. Again, Lloyd Wright himself, from what I read, did not mind adding or modifying to his own buildings, but he had to be the architect. So in this case, I'm really glad he was dead by then. So this was a competition, and it's in this neighborhood designed by Olmsted. It's a very, very delicate neighborhood. So what's amazing to me is this story is also about grassroots movement, not unlike what you do at Center here, which is all the neighbors got together because this Dobby Martine House was abandoned. The University of Buffalo had it for some time. And then a different owner had it. And they actually had some old people's home, like retirement homes built, property was cut up. So the neighbors got together, and then they set up a nonprofit, Dobby Martine House Restoration Corporation, and they started to buy back all the properties, relocated people who lived there, and then organized a competition to do a visitor center and restore the house and rebuild what was this house was Dobby Martine's sister's house and in-laws. And this is Dobby Martine House. They built pergola, conservatory, and carriage house. We built it completely. They ended up actually raising $50 million from a federal, state, and private. And Daniel Patrick Moynihan was involved. Hillary Clinton was involved. It was a total community effort in Buffalo, New York. I can't believe it. So, but anyway, this is the neighborhood, and that's the ground. And this insert here is a visitor center. Again, this was a competition. And idea for this, and also it had to go through very strict historical guideline. This diagonal is what divides the original site with the new site. So I had to do what you call double take, in which it had to look independent and different from a Dobby Martine House, because that's requirement. And historical conservation groups say that the worst thing you can do is imitate to make it look like the original, because it's very confusing to public. To make it distinctive enough is different. But at the same time, it has to read as a total campus. So I had to do two contradictory things to work on this. This was very, very challenging, as you can see. And also this particular house, 1904, 1906, is one of the first house, what you call open plan. It does not have walls, and ceiling dictates the space use. It's a very advanced idea. It has cantilevered, and idea is, again, I'm just kind of sitting back and saying I can't imitate, but I can project the structural module of a pergola that connects it, which is a very similar strategy I used for Cohen's house, which I learned Cohen's house to do that pergola to connect from main house to the guest house. And similar idea is that that's a connective element that relates to landscape. And then we called our pavilion garden pavilion, so that relationship is the site and the garden. And all the structural modules and then proportion had to do with this pergola as a connective element, because the pergola does connect other elements, so it started to connect to the other. Idea which historic people really loved is from a lot of angles you can't see this. So it's kind of hide or seek, peekaboo building in a sense, like, and then also to emphasize some elements of original, which is in this case horizontality. And the roof is reverse hip to note that it's a public building. It's a hip roof, the private house, to say that it's open to public. Materiality is glass as opposed to solid brick, so that it's open and it creates a contrast and opposite. So in a sense, chess games, Frank Lloyd Wright does this, I do that, and so it kind of kept up with many different lists of elements, but also learning from it. Rainer Burnham has also written that Frank Lloyd Wright buildings are one of the most advanced ecological, environmental, what you call sustainable features. Everything can be naturally ventilated, and this particular central piers, which works as a structure, also had infrastructure elements, gas, data, electricity, and ventilation elements. All of that's included in it. So in a sense, it's very good in rare occasions, and I really wanted to pay a tribute to it. These are the piers. And so my visitor center has 4 piers here as a support, and it appears as if a huge cantilever. But in fact, it's not. It's a bit of fooling of an eye. But these small columns, as you see in Connecticut House, John Black Lee House, again, very small, like 7-foot module, tiny little columns, look like mullions, but they are columns. I call them mullums, so it's like a hybrid. But they actually like stitch together the structure to make it appear as a cantilever. And it's the core is in the back, and this is, you are probably very lucky. You don't have to see 8 feet of snow. These people do. It's in Buffalo. The big wind from Great Lakes are coming here. So this is kind of working as an insulating mass to protect it against it. And street side is glass. In the back is a concrete wall, which I show it a little bit. So this kind of looks like this. So there has this appearance of cantilever. And inside has exhibition. And Dobby Martine House was a CFO of one of the first mail order company. And he kept every receipt, every correspondence. And this Dobby Martine House in scholars' mind is one of the best documented building in the history of architecture. He kept everything. It's in University of Buffalo archives. So we had abundant material for exhibit here. And then also, this is a detail which only architects would appreciate because no one can see it. But I hope some like a Guy Peterson might be interested in. It's like, instead of actually doing cantilever, in fact, what cantilevers is this triple glazing, which is clipped at the bottom. And because as I mentioned, 8 foot of snow, when you have a lot of snow, the roof actually moves. So to allow the movement, there's a gap here, which means this 16 feet high glass wall is cantilevered off the ground up. So it's kind of standing upright straight, and then it allows the slight movement, about 3 inches of wall for movement. This I work with SOM Structures, Bill Baker. Bill Baker was doing huge towers in Dubai at the same time. I said, Bill, like, how can you work with me? Like, he was really, because SOM from Chicago, and they actually work with integration of structure and architecture as a very important ethos. So they put a lot of efforts into invent this. I think they won a lot of structural work for this building as a result. And this goes Frank Lloyd Wright, interior, exterior are connected together. And also environmental issues, which again, there's a different climate. Learning from Sarasota is to how to work with natural elements. In fact, the snow is the best insulator. So in this reverse pitch roof, it's symbolic, but also it welcomes snow and insulates it when you need it. And roof pitch also creates a ceiling which allows it to be naturally let tend to fall when they're open. So they really don't need artificial light except for nighttime. And it's a geothermal to be quiet in the neighborhood. And snow light, when there's a snow, there's a lot of light coming in and heat. So it acts as a heat sink and keeps the heat during the day and then heats it up. So there's a lot of, this was work with Transsoul. I don't know if you know, they're Stuttgart-based engineer, probably one of the most amazing advanced environmental engineers, but they did analysis of this. I hope I don't insult LEED advocates, but my clients said that I don't care about LEED plaques. I just want a building which runs in a very low cost, please, which translates to energy efficiency. So it's too complicated for small nonprofit to check off, but they made us work out so that I think they only $500 a month is what they pay. So that's actually a requirement. So it's kind of really interesting about energy efficiency, but it has all the elements and benefits of quality. The back wall is a concrete. It's palimpsest of brick wall, which Frank Lloyd Wright did something very interesting. It's a very deep set, but he painted gold in it. So at nighttime, it actually glow, and you can see bricks suspended. And in the daytime, it's actually in the shadows. It's very interesting. So exact same thing, but cast in concrete as a back wall, as a palimpsest. That's a lighting scheme. I think we also won an award for this lighting with Arab engineers, indirect lighting throughout. So it's actually acts as a vitrine, and then it also offers a dramatic western view of Dobby Martine House, which no one was ever see except in some of the books and drawings. And at nighttime, we show movies of a history of Dobby Martin. It kind of makes ladies cry because Dobby Martin was orphan. He was very poor. He worked really hard. It's like a wrenching story and how he meets Frank Lloyd Wright and then became successful. It's a very nice story. I know they also watch Buffalo Sabres game on this. The next project is also there is we call Greenberg House, and it's inspired by glass houses of Philip Johnson in New Canaan, Connecticut, and then also by Farnsworth House of Miss Mandarow. But clients were very interested in looking at this paradigm of modern architecture of glass house, but then he wanted to have several of them, which is he is an advertisement agency person. He had this idea that if you live in a house, you're only in one space at the same time, which is true. Why should I have a big bedroom, a big living room empty? And then why should I have a kitchen, a big dining room? Why should I have that around me? I just want to live at one time, and then to activate houses. And so everything is digitally controlled, but have 4 different typology of different glass houses on this particular area. This is a very particular demand, but also he wanted to control energy consumption, lighting level, everything. So in a sense, I was just with him last week, and how's your house doing? I don't need any housekeeper. I just go through everything iPad, and now it's very smart. It actually does operate, except he still needs cleaning ladies. But I mean, the glass you have to clean it all the time. So it's on the site, and it has a main small house, which when he and his wife is there, that operates, and they have a dining entertainment pavilion, and exercise pavilion, and guest pavilion. And this main house, it's all surrounded by all sides by floor-to-ceiling glass, and it's a glass box, really. And then dining room, in case it's actually have one L-shaped glass and L-shaped solid. So it's that type of situation there. And then a guest house here has ribbons of clear and solid. And exercise pavilion has all corner windows. So there's a diagonal view across. So this is very different, tectonically very different. And then that's how that looks like. And in a way, they all perform differently. There's some benefit to how they work. And again, detailing, we looked at, in a sense, this one, we wanted to make sure there's symmetrical relationship with top and bottom, so it really appears as floating. And my client is obsessive as I am because Farnsworth House is very beautiful, but it still is bottom heavy. So in a sense, it's grounded. Idea of groundedness as opposed to suspension is something we are after. Another house which has more to do with arts and artists, a dialogue with artists, like to talk about a little bit here. It relates to some of the ideas. This one doesn't relate to legacy of architects, but working with artists. That's another precedence, and this is collective of artists. And I worked very closely with Anthony Gormley here, Richard Long, Irandis Espirito Santo, and Jenny Holzer. So the arts kind of preceded architecture. So in a sense, this is gallerist, and how do you work with this work? And Marina Abranovich, who had a house nearby, and he had Yves Klein and Justice Kossuth's pieces also, some of them, and then Marcel Duchamp archive. So how do you work with these arts and artists? And also he had a collection of mostly Scandinavian vintage furniture, Pierre Kierholm. He's the dealer for Pierre Kierholm. So it's a strange strategy, but in a sense, dialogue with artists. How do you work with it? How to house them together? And it looks like a house has a majority, but it really is in conversation with Anthony Gormley's figure there, which is a very important diagonal relationship to the entry here. And a volume above is a foam, aluminum foam. It's actually very light, but since it looks solid, it looks contradictory as if it's floating element, which I think in architectural language you probably saw. Like, I like this idea of suspension in a way, an industrial material garage, and Richard Long in the back. So to give that space, artwork in our space in which to make the program house work with a functional house, and a large wall to locate it. And Ian Spirito Santo did this piece outside, and inside he actually painted a painting on a wall. That's Anthony's figure here. Working through that. And inside, Jenny Holzer, working with her to do a skylight and stair, which is in proportion to her work. So it's in a sense, it's responding to her installing, but instead of single artists, I'm working with multiple artists. And in this case, it's the family center is very intellectual family, like the Coins. And then in a way that they collect books, and collection of this library become a center of the house. The view from a master bedroom, and he keeps changing artwork installation in this particular space. And some of the things I'm very specific about, a lot of my project is relationship of buildings to a site, and this is upstate New York, but again, it's something I learned a great deal working here. I just showed two projects, just a couple pictures, and I'll go to the last project, which is throughout this ideas of my journey from Sarasota School of Architecture, working here, the environmental issues became very important for me. And then working with scientists to really get at what does it mean in terms of energy and thermodynamics. It's one thing to do Dobby Martine House so that they can operate at low cost, but how do you make that available to the public? And Syracuse University had a competition to do Center for Excellence for Energy Environmental Systems. And then this is it. And this is collaboration about 200 stakeholders, institutions, and firms to do both business and collaborative academic research of both environmental quantity, meaning efficiency, and quality. So those, and how to make that public. So I had learned a lot from scientists. This building is a living lab. They constantly continue to monitor it. And then even some of the presumptions about efficiency of material, even facade they're testing, can be wrong or maybe better performing. So there aren't too many buildings. We don't have a lot of statistics available in this country, especially Germany is much better than ours to come up with how buildings perform. So that's a learning process for me. And then this is a project that Brown University was completed recently, building for environmental research and teaching. And Brown is a very interesting case in which they encourage collaborative work. So there's conservation scientists who have a green roof on top. And then there's a public conservatory which is accessible. You can see the koi fish and some trees and azaleas. And sometimes I found, I think actually there's a guy, this is the greenhouse operator's office, the best office in entire Brown campus. Well, sometimes what he does at graduation, Brown's were buying all the plants for graduation, and he found out they'd spent like 6 years, and he said, I can grow them. So he was growing like tons of geraniums one day, and what are you doing? So it's for graduation. I want a bid to supply it. So he wins a bid to supply graduation flowers, use that money for the research. So he has multiple purpose about it. But they have advocates of lawyers, they have engineers, scientists, marine biologists. So there's isolated silos in this ecological research. So in this particular area, they figured out like they have to work together, they have to encounter each other as research to collaboratively work together in going through that. Again, this is a huge learning process for me. This is, I think, both symbolically, same color in auditorium, same color in greenhouse compound, color of the sky. It's just atmosphere, because that's atmosphere, carbon emission. That's kind of what we want people to be aware of, but it's invisible. The last project I talk about is that African project, because it started as exhibition design for Joseph and Annie Albers, and the project is funded by foundation, and they have another nonprofit called American Friends of Lukosa, which has been funding medical facilities in rural parts of Senegal for 20 years. And the reason I was involved is I designed exhibitions many times, and that's why I appreciate how you did it. This is like a beautifully installed right here. And Cooper Hewitt, this was Joseph and Albers, refugees from Nazi Germany, established school in Black Mountain School, and eventually came to New Haven, and he taught at Yale for many years, influenced many, many artists and architects. And Annie is very well known for weaving in textiles, because in Bauhaus, they did not allow women to work on any other disciplines except on textiles. So there's a lot of innovation in textiles if you have a chance to look at Bauhaus archives. But they never worked together. They were wife and husband. And this is the first exhibition in which both of their work were exhibited together. So there's an amazing symbiosis. And her textiles and Joseph Albers' furniture. And again, he has done a lot of furniture. So that's the start. And in talking about this project in reflection is that I have done research project with them at Harvard, how to work with these rural villages. And my mind only placed in hot climate, which has extreme challenges, is Sarasota. So okay, channel, because more extreme conditions, except they don't have ocean, but flood, rain, tropical climate. It's kind of inspired me, grounded me to think about this project. And I say that because what I realized through learning through this project is in fact, what this particular area can contribute, the value is global. That the center is very important because what you're facing with every day in this climate environment, hurricane, which you don't like, the flash flood and extreme condition, water rise, that's a major global problem. And somehow Sarasota School established amazing model and paradigm for it. And if you could establish, one can actually contribute architectural design of future of many different regions. So keep that in mind. This is Africa. Why am I talking about Africa? But that in my head, that's how I thinking about this, because it's the only clue I had about this. So it's in this Xinjiang is very, very remote. Dakar is the capital of Senegal. It's about 7 hours drive. And this was a cultural center. But it's a village. It's about 750 inhabitants. And it's made up as a part of a medical clinic. And it wanted to make sure that one is to make medical community more accessible, more acceptable, because Senegal is 90% Muslim. There are many tribal doctors, so the Western medicine has not been accepted. And if you have one patient in a family because of polygamy, family comes, but family is about 30 or 40 people. So they can use this cultural center as a waiting room. But also there are certain stigma for certain disease. They can say they can come to this cultural center, they're going to do some homework or do practice dancing, but they could go to clinic at the same time. So, and this clinic is what Albert's Foundation has been, and they have also about 18 others for the last 20 years. So we knew these people very well, and they built a clinic. This is area where it has highest maternal mortality, infant mortality, and then they have built clinic and also and farm school and kindergarten over the years, about 18 different facilities in remote communities to stabilize the rural community. So it's very interesting because it's arts organization, but they actually thought that they can help issues of densification, rapid urbanization through stabilizing rural community, which I think is a very, very clever way. Also, this area have 12 tribes and 12 different languages, but strangely, they live peacefully because they shared performing arts music together. Each tribe has its own musical instruments. They come together and play in marriage ceremonies. So there's a culture they share. And when I talk to economists in this region, says, yes, that's their asset, and we want to promote that.